Walk into any big box gun store today, and the guy behind the counter is going to try to sell you the latest flashy wonder round. He will hand you a sleek rifle and tell you that if it wasn't designed in the 2010s, it is basically a musket. But as someone who has spent thousands of hours behind the trigger and on the range, I can tell you that physics do not care about a release date. Once you start stretching your legs past that 200-yard line, where wind reading, trigger control, and managing recoil actually matter, you realize that terminal ballistics and downrange performance were figured out a long, long time ago. Chamberings gather dust simply because they do not have a massive marketing budget behind them right now. Today, we are taking a hard look at the gun safe and pulling out 9 absolute workhorses. These are the rounds I personally trust. They have dropped heavy game in the freezing timber, anchored coyotes on the windy plains, and reliably put meat in the freezer for generations. We are talking about everything from whisper-quiet precision rounds to flat-shooting speed demons. They punch completely out of their weight class, offering precision and knockdown power that rivals anything fresh off the assembly line. So, grab your eye and ear protection. Let us break down exactly why these old-school powerhouses deserve a spot in your modern loadout. Number 9. 6.5 by 55 mm Swedish Mauser. This design dropped in 1894, and it still outclasses a massive chunk of the modern market. The secret to the Swedish Mauser is perfect internal ballistics. The chamber pressure, the brass elasticity, and the bullet geometry all work together flawlessly. Because it operates at lower pressures than the 6.5 Creedmoor, your barrel life is vastly superior, and your brass lasts through countless reloading cycles. Run a 140-grain Horna D ELDX at 2,700 feet per second, and a bone stock Tikka T3 will effortlessly hold half-minute groups. Scandinavian hunters rely on a 155-grain Lapua Mega at 2,560 feet per second to drop massive moose. The recoil is basically a gentle nudge, making it the absolute best platform for mastering your shooting fundamentals. The long, high BC bullets seat perfectly into a gracefully tapered case, feeding flawlessly from internal box magazines. At 500 yards, it retains over 1,600 foot-pounds of energy. It gets the job done through mass and retained momentum, rather than simply burning out barrels with sheer velocity. You are carrying a modern Howa 1500 or a vintage military surplus rifle. The long throat design lets you seat heavy bullets out far. Guys are still taking these exact rounds to military bolt-action matches and hammering steel at 1,000 yards. When a cartridge has been doing the job perfectly for over a century, that is not just nostalgia. That is undeniable, proven performance. Number 8. 2506 Remington. Take the high-capacity 30-06 case and neck it down to fire quarter-inch projectiles. What you create is a screaming, fast, flat-shooting beast that leaves modern tactical rounds in the dust. Send a 110-grain Nosler AccuBond out at 3,080 feet per second, and you are looking at less than 2 inches of rise at 100 yards. At 300 yards, you are only dealing with a 6-inch drop. That is exactly what you need when you are making snap decisions on fast-moving game across the plains. Even a standard Remington 700 ADL will shoot half-minute groups with a bedded action and a crisp trigger. Oil feels closer to a .243 Winchester, meaning you can easily spot your own trace and prepare for a follow-up shot. If you are hunting black bear, a 115-grain partition at 3,000 feet per second will shatter heavy shoulder bones. Switch over to a 75-grain VMAX, and prairie dogs simply cease to exist at 350 yards. Inside standard hunting distances, the 2506 dominates in both raw speed and kinetic energy transfer. It is incredibly gentle on your bore compared to an overgassed Weatherby Magnum. Backcountry hunters in Alaska love this round because a sub-7-pound bolt gun chambered in this caliber will drop a mountain ram instantly without destroying your shoulder. It delivers Magnum-level performance without the Magnum-level punishment. Number 7. 257 Roberts. Take the legendary 7x57 case, neck it down to a quarter bore, and keep your pressures totally reasonable. The result is an ultra-smooth cartridge that hits with shocking authority. A 117-grain Sierra Pro Hunter at 3,000 feet per second is still cruising above 2,000 feet per second at the 400-yard mark. Rifles like the Winchester Model 70 Featherweight will print sub-inch groups consistently with a good handload. We affectionately call it the Bob, and it generates a mere 9 foot-pounds of felt recoil out of a standard hunting rifle, for teaching new shooters how to maintain trigger discipline and stay in the scope. But make no mistake, the Bob is a lethal killer. It puts down antelope, axis deer, and cow elk with surgical precision. Because the case head spaces sharply on the shoulder, the bullet alignment is practically perfect. Predator hunters love running a 100-grain partition because the muzzle blast is so low, it will not instantly scatter the rest of the pack. While the current market is obsessed with the newest tactical calibers, the .257 Roberts quietly prints cloverleafs at 100 yards and fills the freezer every single season. Number 6. .264 Winchester Magnum. Winchester launched this absolute rocket back in 1959. They promised speeds of 3,200 feet per second with a 140-grain Spitzer out of a 26-inch Model 70. The long-range community went crazy for it, but early chrome moly barrels simply could not handle the friction, and rumors of aggressive throat erosion killed its momentum. Fast forward to today, and modern metallurgy has completely solved that issue. Today's cut-rifled stainless or hammer-forged 5R barrels handle the heat with zero issues. Berger VLD at 3,240 feet per second, and you are ringing steel at 1,000 yards with less wind drift than the modern short magnums. Load up a 120-grain Barnes TTSX at 3,300 feet per second, and those massive cross-canyon shots become incredibly easy. Custom actions like a premium Defiance will shoot 3/8 of an inch groups without breaking a sweat. The beltless case feeds beautifully. While the recoil is noticeably heavier than a 6.5 Creedmoor, it is much more manageable than a 7mm Magnum. Point-blank range on this cartridge is staggering. You can practically use a single holdover from 50 yards all the way to 400. Do not let the old rumors scare you away. A modern barrel will give you over 1,200 rounds of match-grade accuracy, which is a lifetime of big game hunting. Number 5. 6mm Remington, .244 Remington. Introduced in 1955, this was supposed to be the cartridge that buried the .243 Winchester. But the manufacturer made a fatal engineering flaw by giving it a 1 in 12 twist rate. It could not stabilize heavy deer bullets, so shooters labeled it a dedicated varmint round and walked away. By 1963, they fixed it with a 1 in 9 twist barrel and renamed it the 6mm Remington, but the damage was already done. It is a shame because the ballistics are spectacular. A factory 100-grain soft point ripping at 3,100 feet per second is an absolute laser beam on coyotes out to 500 yards. If you reload a high BC 105-grain Hornady AMAX, that trajectory stays incredibly flat. I have seen custom bolt guns push an 85-grain partition out past 3,400 feet per second. Properly tuned Model 700 varmint rifles will easily shoot half-minute groups. The recoil is softer than a .243 Winchester, yet it retains more kinetic energy at distance. That means you stay perfectly on your optic to watch your own impacts. Bore keeps chamber pressures well within safe limits, even when you push the velocities. With a simple swap of your magazine loadout, you can vaporize prairie dogs at sunrise and take a trophy whitetail at dusk. It is one rifle system that truly handles everything. Number 4. .280 Remington. Back in 1957, the engineers at Remington took a 30-06 case, necked it down to a 7mm, and bumped the shoulder forward. They practically engineered the flawless North American hunting cartridge. Unfortunately, the corporate suits completely botched the marketing. Push a 140-grain AccuBond at 3,000 feet per second, and you are shooting flatter and cutting through the wind better than a .270 Winchester. Bump up to a 160-grain partition at 2,900 feet per second, and you get less wind deflection than a 30-06, with way deeper penetration. Off-the-shelf rifles like the Remington Model 700 mountain rifle will shoot 3/4-inch groups all day long without any custom bedding. The felt recoil is incredibly mild, sitting right alongside the 270 rather than beating you up like a 7mm Magnum. Because the powder burn is incredibly efficient, your barrel life is greatly extended. Out in elk country, hunters are dropping absolute monsters at 450 yards using 150-grain Barnes TSX rounds at nearly 3,000 feet per second. So why isn't it the most popular round in America? Remington initially chambered it in semi-autos, then confusingly renamed it the 7mm Express, right as the 7mm Remington Magnum hit the shelves. But serious handloaders know the score. Pack 60 grains of slow-burning powder behind a bonded 150-grain bullet, and you do not even need to dial your turrets for a 400-yard shot. The 280 Remington is the unspoken king of balanced performance. Number 3. 7mm Mauser, 7x57mm. Paul Mauser dropped this masterpiece back in 1892. It is the ultimate sweet spot between minimal shoulder fatigue and deep penetrating downrange energy. Load up a modern 140-grain boat-tail projectile at 2,800 feet per second, and your ballistic drop and wind drift are nearly identical to the hottest 6.5mm cartridges everyone is obsessed with today. But the 7x57 gives you significantly better sectional density to break heavy bone. I have handled old Spanish model 1893 rifles that shoot minute-and-a-half groups with basic iron sights. Throw modern glass on a Ruger No. 1 International, and you are shooting sub-inch cloverleafs. The historical resume of this cartridge is insane. Karamojo Bell famously used a Rigby 275, which is literally just a 7x57, to take massive African game with 173-grain solids. Out here in the western United States, a 150-grain partition flying at 2,700 feet per second holds enough velocity at 300 yards to cleanly harvest bull elk. The tapered shoulder feeds flawlessly through controlled round actions like a tuned Model 98. This case design was so perfect, they stretched it to make the 30-06 and necked it down to make the 257 Roberts. Comfort and sheer kinetic power absolutely exist in the same package, and this cartridge proves it. Number 2. 8mm Mauser, 7.92 by 57mm. This was the backbone of the German war machine through 2 global conflicts. But out in the field, it built a reputation purely on devastating terminal performance. Whether you are busting brush for heavy elk or sitting on a fast-paced European-driven boar hunt, this round delivers. A standard 198-grain Spitzer bullet leaves the muzzle at over 2,600 feet per second, bringing nearly 3,000 foot-pounds of energy with it. People talk about military surplus recoil, but honestly, it is overblown. Firing a full-sized K98 service rifle is far less punishing than a lot of the modern Magnums I test. If you take an action like a CZ550, float the barrel, and check your throat length, you can easily stack rounds inside 1 minute of angle. For my fellow reloaders, this is an absolute playground. You can launch a 150-grain Nosler ballistic tip at 2,900 feet per second, yielding a flat trajectory that makes a 250-yard zero an absolute breeze. But thick timber is where the 8mm truly shines. It carries heavy, deep-penetrating projectiles that crush right through the gristle shield of a massive hog. Even crossing the 300-yard mark, its retained energy is incredibly predictable. Next time you see a surplus Yugo M48 ringing steel at long range, pay attention. With intelligent case geometry and moderate pressure, the 8mm Mauser remains an absolute sledgehammer. Number 1. 303 British. When the boys came home from the trenches, they did not leave their marksmanship behind. They brought those surplus Lee Enfields straight into the deer woods, and that is exactly how the 303 British transitioned from a battle implement to a legendary backcountry meat-getter. If you take a Sporterized No. 4 or an SMLE and feed it a 150-grain soft point pushing 2,690 feet per second, or step up to a heavy 174-grain round nose at 2,460 feet per second. You are looking at phenomenal practical accuracy. I have seen properly bedded Enfields group inside an inch and a half all day long. The recoil impulse here is fantastic. It is a steady, confident push into the shoulder rather than a sharp, violent snap. That keeps you settled on your optic, allowing for a clean follow-through and much tighter groups on paper. Inside 150 yards, a 174-grain load hits with the same authority as a modern .308 Winchester. Handloaders are still using modern propellants like Varget to squeeze sub-minute groups out of old Parker Hale sporters. You are up in a tree stand waiting on a black bear. A 180-grain spear hot core at 2,450 feet per second gives you massive penetration without destroying the meat. The rimmed case design keeps chamber pressures very safe, and the cock-on-close bolt action gives you lightning-fast follow-up shots. It might be an antique to some, but the .303 British is a masterclass in manageable recoil and undeniable reliability. There you have it. 9 absolute workhorses that have earned their stripes in the dirt, not in a corporate boardroom. If you think I missed a legendary cartridge, or if you have a personal favorite sitting in your gun safe right now, drop it down in the comments. I read all of them, and I love seeing what you guys are running out in the field. If you got some value out of this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next one. Stay safe and shoot straight.